For the rest of my life, the first Sunday of a new year will always be a very, very special day because 2 years ago, in about another 5.5 hours, is when my daughter was born. So her birthday, because of how the days change as the calendar goes by, is on Tuesday. But it just feels real special. I remember being here 2 years ago and standing up here because Crystal had started her contractions before I left. And which really should be called expansions, I think. And so we were just kind of like, I had my cell phone on me the whole time because I was on leave if she started giving, if it got to the point where I needed to go before church was over. And it managed, Crystal gave her, I watched, at 5:40 on Sunday afternoon. We did the in-home thing and all that for those of you that are here, or weren't there here 2 years ago. So it was really a special time in my life to always speak about that moment. And for those of you that have been around a brand new baby coming into the world, whether it was you as a parent or you there supporting someone or giving birth yourself, it is just an incredible experience. And if we ever wonder how pure life is, just be present at a birth. And as I've said many times to many people, and in my own experience, be present at the moment of death. And what I've come to understand is that they're both very similar. It's just a changing of existence. It's a changing of expression. It's either the arriving or the departing. And if you know when you go to the airport, there's both. And it's kind of, that's the way life is we're either arriving or departing. So how many of you are arriving here in life? Still waiting to arrive. So on to today. I'm going to eventually get to the theme, but I wanted to cover a few things about that as Karen chose a wonderful reading from Debbie Ford. And if you haven't read any of Debbie Ford's books, I highly recommend any and all of them, as they're very good. So as we start into the new year, how many, by show of hands, you actually sat down and wrote your goals out? Wow! Easy. Okay. Well, we should be doing a goal writing class. How many of you thought about some new goals? Oh, great. Well, how about, did those thoughts include losing weight? Did those thoughts include paying off debts? Save more money? Provide better income for the family? Spend more quality time with the family? But as Karen read, that Debbie Ford had written, is that by February we're often back to repeating the old patterns from the year before, such as gaining a little more weight, going a little further in debt. Didn't have a saving account last year, you're not going to have one this year. And you're going to keep working at the exact same job, at the exact same wage. And man, is that computer important. Much more important than family time. And how about some of these goals? See if these would be really more realistic for you. To win the lottery. Not to have any more children. And doing laundry is right up there for you. And there will be something with reading. You want to make sure you read something this year. Something about math. And something with Spanish. You want a new Spanish. You want a new language. And some more fitness. And something for a friend. Oh yeah, you'll have one travel goal. To visit a state you haven't been to. Or a problem. But in this case, a state. Because you've already been to confusion, delusion, paranoia, and disaster. And so you thought you might try the state of panic. And that about does it for your goals. Because Bono said he'd take care of the world hunger for you. So seriously, what are your personal goals for this upcoming year? And when we only hold our goals in our mind, in our heads, what it does is it prevents them from having a form and expression. And there's something about magic, but it's really not magic. It's about creating a form, a shape, a foundation, a form for them to show up by writing them down. And you always want to make sure that your goals are realistic when you write them down. Is that it's not something that is totally unrealistic, so that they are achievable and accomplishable, but when you look at it, you go, ooh, that's a little bit of a stretch. So you want to look at, what are your spiritual goals? Have you given it any thought? Is there a desire inside of you to grow more into being that expression of spirit? Is there a desire inside of you to grow into being a greater expression of love and of joy and of peace? To embrace and embody more of who and what we naturally are? Is that a goal? Because see, when it becomes a goal, then you set your intention and it begins to create a course for you to follow along. But when we just keep it in our head, then it's like, well, who knows when you achieve it? But when you put it down and you can measure it, it gives it a measuring platform to look at. And writing goals is something that I don't think I've ever gone a year without writing down some goals. And this last year, I found my goals about a month ago, because sometimes I've done that too. I place my goals where I can't find them again. But I found them a month ago after we had returned from Disneyland, and I had forgotten what some of my goals were, and one of them was to take the family to Disneyland. So that felt really good when we went to Disneyland a couple of months ago, because that had been a goal that I had put down for our family for a couple of years. And when you see something that you've accomplished, and you wrote it a year ago, you just feel good. So how you look at and outline where you want your goals is spiritually, and then mentally, what's your goals as far as what do you want to achieve within your mind? You want to be more positive. You want to be more present for others. You want to stop complaining. You want to stop criticizing. And my favorite that's growing on me more and more is to stop placing expectations on other people. Man, if we could just wipe all that out right now, boy, wouldn't it be great. The expectations that we show up with all the time in life are very defeating. Because we place expectations on how we want another person to behave, how we want another person to be grateful, how we want another person to say yes, or how we want another person to respond, or how we want another person to look. Those constant expectations. And it's like, when it comes to church, boy, have I found the expectations we have around church. It's like, there's no way I can meet them all. Because you know what? I don't even know what they are. But you do. And you notice that's what we do about our expectations, is we keep our expectations secret from another person. But when they don't meet them, then they fail. But they don't know that they failed because we haven't told them what our expectations are, because we're really not clear what our expectations are. We just know that you're not meeting them. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And you see, the smaller our thinking process around this subject becomes, the bigger our expectations are on others. And it's really hard to meet someone's hidden expectations. So maybe that might be a goal for you. To become more accepting, to give others the freedom to be themselves. Emotionally. What's that emotional one? Or 2 or 3 or 300? What do you want to do with your emotions? How you think and how you feel about yourself and how you feel about others? Is there any room for improvement in there? And then physically. That's always a stubborn one, isn't it? Mine is, this is the year, and I've been saying this for a while, this has got to be it. Where I am so tired of carrying around this belly. And what I found out a lot of stuff about my trip to Disneyland, but as far as carbohydrates, my body is, I don't know how else to put it, it's allergic to carbohydrates. And that kind of sounds funny, but 3 weeks before my wife and I left, we had been on an all-protein diet, and then only vegetables along with protein. And I was down to 226, which is good for me, 215, and I'm like perfect weight. So I was 11 pounds, not very much, just 11 pounds away from perfect body weight for me. And I go to Disneyland, we go away for 8 days. We didn't care what we ate. And I didn't eat that much more or that different than what Crystal ate. And mind you, we were on our feet all day, 8, 10, 12 hours, walking 4, 5, 8, 10 miles, I mean a lot. All day long, 5 days, I'm thinking, good, this won't be any problem. I was somewhat conscious of what I ate, and some days I wasn't. You ever had that? Kind of how we go most of the time. And I get home, and guess how much I gained? 22 pounds! 22! So, how carbs into me to figure out that it doesn't work. Which is really what leads us to where I want to talk about our theme for the year. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. But can I back up for one moment? Will you be patient with me? I do want to take a moment and speak on what our goals for us as the Victoria Center for Inspired Living is. So that we stated out there out front so we're nice and clear on where I want us to go. Number one, and the reason we are a community, is to grow spiritually. And from the very first talk I ever gave here on October 26th of 08, I talked about our main thing is growing in our spiritual relationship in spirit, in God, in the holy mystery, in the love, beauty, power, in the infinite presence. To grow there spiritually, to deepen our awareness of our divine connection in God. That's our number one goal. It will always be our number one goal, is to be growing spiritually so that we are a greater expression of spirit, of love, of compassion, of kindness, of forgiveness, of acceptance, etc., etc., etc. Easy to get that? So get on that one. And then to look at the more materialistic or more physically obvious ones is to hire an administrative assistant, to move into an office space, to sell the Center for Self-Awareness building, to break the 100 barrier, to average $2,000 per week, to have at least 7 small groups growing at a time, to grow our youth ministry, and to expand our ministry and counseling services. So that's the beginning of where I see us growing into this next year. And those are all achievable, all easily accomplishable. So that's what I see as some of our goals, and we'll always look at expanding those as we move into this year. So into the topic and what our theme will be for this year. And whenever our first year was the year to dare, which was about stretching out of our comfort zones and going beyond what is the norm. And then last year was the year of living in beauty, bliss, and bounty. And whenever I work on a theme, because it is kind of the course and it is really the direction that I want us to move as a spiritual community, I start praying really early, back in like October, November, and many times working on it even before that. But I start listening inwardly. When I'm in my meditation time, when I'm in that good state of mind, not when I'm in the middle of changing Liberty's diaper or doing dishes, but when I've taken some time to just be in the moment. And as I listened and have been listening and listening, what kept coming up for us, for me, is the understanding that many of us are doing our best to be on the spiritual path. But what makes it difficult for us to be on our spiritual path is that we are practicing defeating behaviors. And that's why it really surprised me when Karen read what she did, because we hadn't talked or anything, and she comes up here and reads about how important it is for us to move, when we're moving on our spiritual journey, is that we eliminate or heal or erase or let go of any defeating behaviors. Because it's kind of hard to be on the spiritual journey if we're doing behaviors that don't support ourselves to our highest and best good, or as importantly, those around us to their highest and best good. So when I say a defeating behavior, does anyone begin to identify with your own defeating behaviors that perhaps you have been doing for a long time? That you've been doing them for so long, we've almost become unconscious to them, and they've become almost ingrained or woven into our pattern or our beingness. And we just think they're a part of our personality. Does anybody have one of those defeating behaviors? Mine is, I just shared, which one? I'll share a lot of them. Is the carbs. I've known it. My dad died from it. My brother died from it. Of eating in an unhealthy way that doesn't support our hearts to our highest and best good. For whatever reason it is, my ancestors don't handle that type of food well. So what defeating behavior have you been carrying with you for a while? And yet we stand here, or we work on ourselves, and we keep trying to grow spiritually, but we have this big blank spot, this big void that keeps pulling us back into it. Every time we take a step forward, it sucks us back. Do you know any of those behaviors? Now, they can be referred to as in many different forms. We can call them unhealthy habits. We can call them defeating behaviors. And we can also call them addictions. And addictions are not always words that we love hearing, because we immediately think the worst when we hear the word addict or addiction. And all that an addiction is, I want you to hear this because you're going to hear it perhaps a lot this year, is it's just a behavior or a habit or a pattern that you have a hard time or feel powerless to stop doing. And every time you do that behavior or that pattern, or in a sense that addiction, it is defeating yourself or causing harm to yourself or to those around us. And what I have found in my years of doing this work is that people will pray and they meditate and they'll work on themselves and they attend church and they go to counseling and they do readings and they do everything that should be growing along the spiritual path and taking us to a higher level of awareness, which is what we're always stretching to, but yet we're still practicing something that keeps holding us back. And so I thought to myself in all my prayer and meditation that, wow, what if we could release and heal and change and transform that thing or those things that are holding or defeating us from growing into our magnificence? Would that be a successful spiritual year as a community?
Yes.
I think so. I think so. Because in my years of counseling, and I'm growing in counseling because people are starting to realize how good I am. And that's not bragging, because I see I'll stand up here and tell you what all my weaknesses. But if I can tell you all my weaknesses, I'm going to tell you all my strengths. And I just had somebody come over and spend about 14 hours with me over 4 days. From Vancouver, spent the night at the Empress, 4 nights at the Empress, to come and work with me after he'd been working with counselors for a majority of his life. And boy, did we have fun. I laid him out. No. That's funny if you're a therapist. But really did a lot of good work, and it's based on a few weeks ago. I worked with 2 people who referred him for a successive hours in a row, a few days in a row. And what I realized for the first time is that working with somebody in a focused point and in an excessive amount, or an extra, what's the word I'm looking for? A lot of hours. What? Continuous.
Consecutive
time. Instead of an hour every week, get 12 hours in a few days, and man, you can really make some headway. And so, very successful person, actually a millionaire, if finances mean anything. Very successful in all these things out here. But boy, when it came down to his personal life, wow, what a shift. What a shift. And what has happened, and what I continuously realize, is how much of this stuff that we can drag along and still manage to do well out here. So what if we weren't dragging this stuff along? How well would we do? How well could we parent? How well could we relate to each other? How well could we thrive as a community? How well can you thrive in your family if you're not dragging something like this along that you've been doing for so long that you think it's normal, that you just think it's a part of you? And so what I believe our theme is, and what I want it to be, and what excites me, is transformation. And so what I want us as our theme, if you will be with me and open your consciousness to it and let it sift in through and settle in and form around all your molecules and all that stuff, or just accept it, is for this year, our 2011, what I would like our theme, and what I would intend our theme and declare our theme to be, is to be, for each of us, to be a vessel for transformation. To be a vessel where we can take our sadness and turn it into joy. Where we can take our wounds and turn them into triumphs. Where we can take our old patterns and turn them into new behaviors that bring us a sense of fulfillment and success, that open us to our greatness. Because when we're dragging those defeating behaviors, it's hard to step and emerge and embrace our greatness. And when we can turn around and go, you know what? I healed that addiction. I healed that unhealthy behavior. I healed that pain in my life that I've been dragging with me for 40 or 50 or more years. I healed those hurts and wounds that I thought were a part of me, but I realized that I was dragging them with me, and that as I release them, I transform my life into that which I was naturally intended to be, which is that divine expression of spirit. So what is it that we need to release, let go of, that when we take a look at it, it's not very pleasant. But when we look at it, we feel powerless over it, which is why we've drug it with us for so long. What do you feel powerless over in your life? Powerless over your ability to grow emotionally? Powerless over a wound that occurred a long time ago in your life? Powerless over a behavior, whether it's alcohol, gambling, sex, that's grabbed a hold of you, and it doesn't feel like you can shake it. So this is what I've always wanted to do, is bring together two of the great philosophies. Two of the great teachers, and integrate them into a spiritual community. I want to bring together the teachings of religious science and Ernest Holmes with the teachings of Bill Wilson. And what if we integrated them? And we incorporated the spiritual principles of the 12-step programs with the teachings of New Thought. And instead of having them stand alone or stand separate of each other, that we brought them together and we used the strength of both of them. This is what it looks and sounds like when you integrate the 12 steps. The 12 steps integrated with 12 spiritual principles along with 12 promises and 12 action steps. My intention is that each month we'll focus on a step and evolve up the steps. Step 1. We admitted, and you can affirm this with me if you know it, we admitted we were powerless over our addiction, that our lives had become unmanageable. Is there anything in your life, any pattern, any behavior that you feel powerless to change? And that our lives have become unmanageable. The spiritual principle we'll focus on is honesty. Can we be honest with ourselves and with others? And the promise is we're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. And the action step is ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Step 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. The spiritual principle is hope. The promise is, we will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. And the action step is, we will embrace our hurts and pains and become stronger because of them. It's your hurts and pains that give you strength. When we deny they're there, weakness. When we look at them and go, my God, but we can make it through. And we embrace those hurts and pains, is when our strength improves and increases. Step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand God to be. Wow. Imagine turning our will over to the creator of the universe. What a difference that would be. Instead of our human will driving us, we open ourselves up to the will of God, to the will of our higher power, to the Spirit to move through us, which creates the spiritual principle of a journey of faith. That we will not regret the past, nor shut the door on it. And as we embrace our hurts and pains, we will become stronger. And then step forward. 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. That means we look in every nook and cranny of our internal closets. And the spiritual principle that allows us the ability to do that is courage. To have courage to do that. We will know peace, is the promise. And with it will come to our grips with our burdens, our mistakes, and our secrets. Step 5. Admit it to God, to ourselves, and to our priest. Why is that not funnier? Admit it to God, to ourselves, and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. The spiritual principle is integrity. And no matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. It's in the sharing of our hurts and wounds with others that we can empower and give people a window to see what they're capable of growing into. And we will grow in spiritual, self, and relational trust. Step 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And our spiritual principle is willingness. And then the promise is that feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. And we will grow in self-love, in self-esteem, in self-respect, and in self-worth. And step 7, humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings. The spiritual principle is humility. And we will lose interest. The promise is we will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. The action step is we will grow in selfless service, and we will heal our selfish and self-centered behaviors and thoughts. Step 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. The spiritual principle is forgiveness. Self-seeking will slip away, and we will learn to live in reverence of all life. Step 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. The spiritual principle is justice, meaning fairness and impartiality. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. And the action step is we will grow in the power of spiritual discernment that will limit or halt or stop our compulsive and impulsive behaviors and tendencies. Step 10. Continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. The spiritual principle is perseverance. And the promise is fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. And the action step we'll take is to embrace and practice the law of circulation. Step 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understand God. Praying only for knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry out that will. The spiritual principle is spiritual awakening. The promise is we will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. And the action step is we will learn the power of the pause before we speak and act. Step 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to other addicts, to other unhealthy practitioners of bad or non-supportive behaviors, and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. The spiritual principle simply is brotherly and sisterly love. Can we lend ourselves to each other's support in their journey? And the promise is we will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. And lastly, the action step is we will actively share the message of God's compassion. So our theme for this year is to be that vessel for transformation. When we can turn hurt into joy, when we can turn defeat into triumph, when we can turn fear into faith, when we can turn a broken promise into a commitment. We truly are a vessel for change. A vessel to make a shift in our community, in our family, in our spiritual life. We are here this year to be that vessel. Let us take a moment.